June 4th, 1942, 5:45 a.m. The vast Pacific swells beneath the flight deck of the Japanese carrier Akagi, flagship of Admiral Kahichi Nagumo's strike force. Salt spray stings the faces of the deck crew as they scramble under the dim pre-dawn light, the roar of Zero fighters warming up, drowning out the crash of waves. Tension coils like a spring. Pilots strap in, hearts pounding, eyes scanning the horizon for the enemy they believe they've outmaneuvered. But high above, unseen, American dive bombers circle like vultures, bombs slung heavy under their wings. In moments, the sea will erupt in fire. What started as laughter in Tokyo's war rooms is about to become a nightmare. In the smoke-filled strategy rooms of Tokyo, just months after the thunderous success at Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto leaned over maps of the Pacific, his sharp eyes gleaming with calculated confidence. He was the architect of Japan's naval might, a man who'd studied at Harvard and gambled big. His raid on Hawaii had crippled the American battleship fleet, leaving the U.S. Navy reeling like a boxer caught off guard. But Yamamoto knew the war wasn't won. "We've awakened a sleeping giant," he'd warned. His voice low and grave amid the celebrations, yet his subordinates, flush with victory, couldn't hide their smirks when talk turned to the American carriers. The USS Enterprise, Yorktown, and Hornet, these were the remnants of a navy they deemed amateurish, their flat tops dismissed as floating experiments. Inferior vessels, Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki scoffed in his diary, comparing them to Japan's own Akagi and Kaga, battle-hardened giants forged in the fires of imperial ambition. The Americans relied on untested tactics, their pilots green, their ships vulnerable, without the heavy armor of true dreadnoughts. Laughter echoed in the officers' mess. What can their tin cans do against our samurai of the skies? Picture it. The Imperial Japanese Navy, a force of 200 warships, including 6 fleet carriers that had dominated the seas from Singapore to the Indian Ocean. By early 1942, they'd swept through the Philippines, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies, their Zero fighters outclassing anything the Allies threw at them. Yamamoto's men saw the U.S. Pacific Fleet as a joke, its carriers mere nuisances to be swatted away. They fight like merchants, not warriors. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi quipped aboard the Hiryu, his words carrying the weight of cultural superiority. Japan's carriers were symbols of divine destiny, crewed by men who lived by Bushido, ready to die for the emperor. But beneath the bravado, cracks for Yamamoto, ever Larilas, pushed for a decisive blow. Midway Atoll, a speck of sand 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii, became the target. Capture it, and Japan could extend its defensive perimeter. Lure out those mocked American carriers and crush them once and for all. The plan was audacious. 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, would lead the charge. Supported by battleships and cruisers, a fleet so massive it stretched horizons. Nagumo, commanding the carrier group, nodded approval, his mind already tasting victory. You can almost hear the clink of sake cups and toasts to inevitable triumph. Intelligence reports painted the Americans as disorganized, their codes unbreakable, or so the Japanese thought. Little did they know, in a dim basement in Hawaii, U.S. cryptographers at Station HYPO had cracked JN-25, Japan's naval code. Commander Joseph Rushford and his team worked feverishly, piecing together fragments. AF was Midway, the invasion imminent. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the steely Texan in charge of the Pacific Fleet, saw opportunity in the arrogance. "They think we're weak," he told his staff, a faint smile breaking through. "Let them come." As Japanese pilots trained relentlessly, perfecting torpedo runs and dive-bombing drills, the Americans patched their wounds. The Enterprise, under Rear Admiral Raymond's, embodied resilience, her decks scarred from early skirmishes, but her air group, hungry for payback. Yorktown, battered at Coral Sea, was miraculously repaired in days at Pearl Harbor's dry docks, welders working around the clock amid sparks and sweat. Horney, the newest sister, carried the unproven Torpedo Squadron 8, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, a man whose quiet determination masked a fire for vengeance. The stage was set. Hubris fueling the Japanese advance. Fleet after fleet sorted from Hashirajima, Yamamoto aboard the mighty Yamato, the world's largest battleship, trailing far behind as a reserve. They sailed into the blue expanse, convinced of superiority. But whispers of doubt lingered. Had they underestimated the inferior foe? As the armada cut through the waves toward Midway, the first hints of reversal loomed on the horizon, unseen and deadly. What if the Laftat carrier struck first? Dawn broke over Midway Atoll on June 3, 1942, casting long shadows across the coral runway where American PBY Catalina flying boats taxied into the wind, their engines growling like awakened beasts. Marines hunkered in sandbagged foxholes, rifles at the ready, while radar operators stared at flickering screens, hearts skipping at every blip. The air hummed with anticipation. Nimitz had positioned his carriers northeast of the atoll, hidden in the vast ocean. Task Force 17, with Yorktown under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, and Task Force 16 with Enterprise and Hornet, commanded by they were the underdogs, outnumbered but armed with foreknowledge. Far to the west, Nagumo's carrier strike force sliced through the swells, the Akagi's massive flight deck alive with activity. Zeros patrolled the skies, their pilots cocky, scanning for any sign of the enemy. Nagumo paced the bridge, his binoculars trained on the horizon, confident in the plan. Soften Midway with airstrikes, then land troops. Yamamoto's main force trailed hundreds of miles behind, a hammer waiting to fall. But the Japanese scouts, B-5 and Kate bombers fanning out like fingers, reported nothing unusual. All clear, came the signals, lulling the admirals into deeper assurance. You feel the salt-laden breeze whipping across the decks, the rhythmic thump of boots as crews-armed Val dive bombers with land attack bombs. Not anti-ship torpedoes, a fateful choice born of overconfidence. The Americans are blind, Ugaki noted in his log, dismissing scattered reports of sightings as minor threats. Meanwhile, at Pearl Harbor, Rochefort's codebreakers fed Nimitz real-time intel. The Japanese were coming, divided, and predictable. The first blood came at 9:20 AMA on June 3, when a PBY spotted the Japanese transport group, lumbering toward Midway like a herd of elephants. Many ships, the pilot radioed, his voice crackling over the ether. Nimitz nodded the diversionary force, but it was the carriers he wanted. That night, B-17, flying fortresses lumbered off from Midway, their bomb bays heavy, dropping payloads on the transports amid flak bursts that lit the sea like fireworks. Hits were claimed, but in truth, minimal damage. The Japanese pressed on, laughing off the ineffective raids. June 4th dawned fateful. At 4:30 a.m., Nagumo launched his strike. 108 planes, 36 Zeros, 36 Bals, 36 Kates roaring off the decks of Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, bound for Midway. The pilots climbed into the pink sky, formation tight, spirits high. For the Emperor, they shouted over intercoms. Below, reserve planes waited, armed for a second wave against any lurking ships. Nagumo's decision: keep half the force ready for ground support, the other for naval threats. Arrogance dictated flexibility, but it would prove a noose. As the Japanese planes neared Midway, American radar picked them up. Sirens wailed. Marines scrambled 2 anti-aircraft guns. Wildcat fighters lifted off, outnumbered but fierce. The sky erupted in dogfights, Zeros twisting like acrobats, shredding the slower American planes. Vals dove through the chaos, bombs cratering runways, igniting fuel dumps in orange blooms. Midway is burning, the strike leader reported back, triumph in his tone. But the atoll held its defenders, bloodied but unbowed. Nagumo received the news aboard Akagi, a satisfied grunt escaping him. Rearm for a second strike on the island, his staff debated, the air thick with cigarette smoke. Then, at 7:15 a.m., a scout plane's urgent message shattered the calm. 10 enemy ships sighted. American surface force. Nagumo hesitated. Change bombs, WW2 torpedoes. The decks buzzed with confusion. Planes halfway continued with land bombs. He ordered initially, underestimating the threat. But doubt crept in. Unseen Spruance had launched his own strike at 7 a.m. from Enterprise and Hornet. 170 planes, including Devastator torpedo bombers, Dauntless dive bombers, and Wildcat escorts. Waldron's Torpedo 8 from Hornet flew low, determined, "We'll find them," Waldron vowed to his men, his South Dakota drawl steady, but the groups separated in the clouds. Coordination, fraying, back on Nagumo's carriers. Another scout corrected. Enemy includes a carrier. Panic flickered. At 7:45 a.m., Nagumo reversed, rearm for anti-ship. Hangars filled with fuel lines, bombs, torpedoes, The Admiral's face tightened. The mocked Americans were here, closer than thought. At 8:20 a.m., the first American attacks arrived piecemeal. B-17s from Midway bombed high, missing wildly amid evasive maneuvers. Then Marine dive bombers, uncoordinated, plunged into zero swarms. Most shot down, no hits. Nagumo's fleet danced through explosions, unscathed. Laughter returned. Their attacks are pitiful, but as the Japanese recovered their Midway strike planes, fuel vapors heavy in the air, a shadow loomed. High above, Lieutenant Commander Clarence McCluskey's dive bombers from Enterprise circled, low on fuel. Searching desperately, a Japanese destroyer's wake pointed the way like a breadcrumb trail to doom. What if those inferior bombers found their mark? 10:20 a.m., June 4, 1942. The sky above Nagumo's carriers shimmers with heat haze. The sea a mirror of deceptive calm. Aboard the Akagi, flight decks swarm with crews refueling and rearming planes in a frenzy. Aviation gasoline hoses snake across the planking, high-octane fumes thick enough to taste. Zeros circle protectively overhead, their pilots oblivious to the peril closing in from 15,000 feet. McCluskey's SBD, Dauntless dive bombers, 37 strong from Enterprise, spot the telltale wake of the destroyer Arashi racing back to the fleet after depth charging an American sub. There they are, McCluskey mutters into his oxygen mask, banking hard, his squadron following like arrows knocked to a bow. Simultaneously, from Yorktown, Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie's 17 Dauntlesses streak in, their bomb sights calibrated, adrenaline surging, the Japanese carrier steam in tight formation. A diamond of death. Akagi at the center, Kaga to starboard, Soryu and Hiryu flanking. Nagumo's lookouts scan the horizon, but the threat comes from above, straight down. Earlier attacks had drawn the zero-cap low. Waldron's Torpedo 8, flying obsolete Devastators, had charged in at wave-top height, brave but doomed. "This is it, boys," Waldron had radioed, veering off course on instinct to find the enemy. One by one, Zeros shredded them. 15 planes down, only Ensign George Gay surviving, floating amid wreckage, witnessing the carnage from the water. Torpedo squadrons from Enterprise and Yorktown fared no better. Low and slow, they bored in through walls of flak and fighters. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay's VT-6 lost 10 of 14. Yorktown's VT-3, 11 of 12. Explosions dotted the sea, black smoke trailing like funeral pyres. But their sacrifice wasn't in vain. It pinned the Zeros at sea level, exhausting ammo and fuel. Nagumo watched from Akagi's bridge, relief washing over him. The enemy torpedo attacks have failed. His carriers twisted evasively, unhit. Decks still chaotic with rearming. "Launch the counterstrike," he ordered. Planes spotting for takeoff. You can almost feel the vibration of engines revving, the metallic temps of gunpowder lingering. Below decks, hangars brimmed with ordnance, 500-pound bombs stacked, torpedoes slung, fuel carts wheeling. A single spark could ignite hell. And then, at 10:22 a.m., the lookout's cry pierced the din. Dive bombers. McCluskey's group peeled off first, noses tipping vertical, wind screaming past canopies as they hurtled down at 70 degrees. Altimeters unwinding like clocks in reverse. "Push! Over!" McCluskey commanded, releasing is 1,000-pound bomb on Kaga, the massive carrier below filling his sights. Behind him, Lieutenant Richard bested targeted Akagi, Yamamoto's former flagship, her red sun ensign, snapping defiantly. Bombs whistled earthward, arming wires snapping free. Kaga took the first hits, 4 bombs in quick succession, slamming into her flight deck amid parked planes. Fuel ignited instantly, a chain reaction erupting. Explosions rippled through her hull, flames leaping 200 feet high, black smoke billowing like a volcano. Crewmen screamed, diving overboard into oil-slicked waters as secondary blasts tore her apart. "She's gone," a pilot radioed, voice awed. Seconds later, Besk's bomb pierced Akagi's deck, detonating in the hangar amid torpedoes and fueled Zeros. The blast lifted the elevator like a toy, fire racing through compartments, engulfing the bridge. Captain Tajiro Aoki staggered, ordering abandon ship as the inferno consumed his command. Nagumo, stunned, transferred his flag to a cruiser, his face ashen. The invincible Akagi, symbol of Japanese prowess, reduced to a pyre. Soryu suffered next. 3 bombs from Yorktown's bombers gutted her, engines exploding, steering jammed, flames engulfed her island superstructure, pilots trapped in cockpits burning alive. Within minutes, 3 carriers blazed uncontrollably, their crews fighting futile fires with buckets and hoses, the sea around them dotted with survivors clinging to debris. Aboard Hiryu, the sole survivor, Yamaguchi raged. Counterattack. His planes launched desperately, valves and Kates winging toward the American fleet. They found Yorktown, hammering her with bombs and torpedoes, fires raging aboard as damage control teams battled to save her. But the cost, Japanese air groups decimated, Zeros splashing for lack of decks to land on. The sea churned with horror. Men boiling in superheated water, sharks circling the wounded. Gay, hidden under a seat cushion, watched the apocalypse unfold. The once mighty fleet fracturing. Spruance, cool on Enterprise's bridge, received reports. 3 burning enemy carriers sighted. A turning point, born of American grit and Japanese hubris. Yet Hiryu lingered, a venomous sting. Her second wave sought revenge. Would it claim the Enterprise? Smoke choked the afternoon sky on June 4, 1942, as the remnants of Nagumo's fleet scattered like wounded animals across the Pacific's unforgiving expanse. The Akagi listed heavily, her hull a skeleton wreathed in flames, while Kaga and Soryu slipped beneath the waves in a hiss of steam and screams, dragging hundreds to watery graves. Aboard the cruiser Nagara, now Nagaro's makeshift flagship, the Admiral stared at the horizon, his uniform soot-streaked, the weight of failure pressing like an anchor. "What happened?" he murmured to his staff, the words barely audible over the distant thunder of explosions. 3 carriers gone in 10 minutes, a catastrophe unimaginable hours ago. Yet Hiryu pressed on, the last bastion of Japanese air power, her deck a hive of defiant activity. Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, a firebrand with a poet's soul, rallied his men from the bridge. "We will avenge our sisters." His voice cut through the chaos, stealing hot. At 10:50 a.m., Hiryu's first wave, 80 Vels escorted by 6 Zeros, had already struck Yorktown, bombs cratering her flight deck, starting fires that billowed black and acrid. Damage control parties aboard the American carrier hosed down the inferno, sailors coughing through wet rags. But she stabilized, her engines throbbing steadily. Now, Yamaguchi launched a second strike, 10 Kate, torpedo bombers, and 6 more Zeros, led by Lieutenant Joichi Tominaga, a veteran whose plane limped on one engine from the morning's Midway raid. "Press the attack," Tominaga radioed, his squadron skimming the waves toward Task Force 17. Fletcher, aboard Yorktown, scanned the radar plots, blips closing fast. All hands to battle stations, blared the loudspeakers, the ship vibrating as Wildcats scrambled aloft, the sky filled with tracers, Zeros tangling with American fighters in a deadly ballet. At 2:45 p.m., the Kates board and low, torpedoes dropping like silver lances into the sea. 2 struck Yorktown's port side amidships, explosions ripping through her boiler rooms, flooding compartments with a roar. Power failed, lights flickering out. She listed 23 degrees, dead in the water. Abandoned ship. Fletcher queried his captain, Elliot Bookmaster, shaking his head. No, they'd save her. Crewmen slid down lines into rescue boats, the sea oily with fuel, but salvage teams stayed aboard, pumping furiously. You sense the desperation in the air. The metallic bite of cordite mixing with the salt spray. Aboard Enterprise, Spruance received the news. Yorktown hit, but Hiryu exposed. Launch everything, he ordered calmly, his Texas drawl masking the stakes. At 3:30 p.m., 24 Dauntlesses lifted off from Enterprise in the orphaned Yorktown plains, now based on her sister, Hornet's Air Group, delayed earlier, joined the hunt. Led by Lieutenant Wallace Short, they vectored toward Hiryu's last known position, the sun dipping westward, casting long shadows over the battle. Hiryu steamed alone, her scouts reporting the American carrier's location. Yamaguchi prepared a third strike, but time ran short. At 5 p.m., the lookout's shout echoed. Enemy dive bombers approaching. Zero's raced to intercept, but fuel and numbers dwindled. The Dauntlesses pushed over, screaming down in near vertical dives. Bomb sites locked on Hiryu's deck packed with planes. 4 bombs hit home. One amidships, detonating fueled aircraft in a cascade of fireballs. Another near the bridge, killing dozens. The rest gutting her engineering spaces. Flames roared through vents, superheating metal, buckling plates. Yamaguchi, bloodied but unbowed, addressed his staff. I will go down with her. He and Captain Tomiokaku tied themselves to the bridge as the carrier shuddered, listing hard to port. By 9 p.m., Hiryu was abandoned. Her survivors transferred to destroyers. She sank at 2 a.m. the next day, Yamaguchi's final haiku unspoken. The sea claimed her, bubbles rising like ghosts, but the battle raged on. Yorktown, patched and underway again, fell victim to a Japanese submarine I-168 on Junsei's torpedoes, finishing what Hiryu's plane started. She capsized slowly, her hull groaning in protest, finally slipping under on June 7th. A dignified end for a valiant ship. Yamamoto, aboard Yamato far to the west, received fragmented reports. All 4 carriers lost. His face paled. The invasion of Midway aborted. Withdraw, he signaled, the mighty battleships turning tail, shadowed by American subs and scouts. Spruance, cautious, declined pursuit into the night, preserving his force. In the aftermath, the Pacific's balance shifted. Japan's offensive halted, her carrier elite decimated, over 3,000 dead, 110 pilots gone. America lost Yorktown and destroyer Haman, but gained initiative. Nimitz wired Washington. Pearl Harbor has been partially avenged, but was the revenge complete, or merely the spark of a longer inferno? In the dim glow of Yamato's operations room, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto absorbed the final dispatches like bitter medicine, his fingers tracing the maps where victory had slipped away. June 5, 1942, the Japanese fleet retreated westward, a shadow of its former might. Cruisers and destroyers picking through flotsam for survivors, the air heavy with the stench of oil and defeat. 4 carriers sunk, 248 aircraft lost. The cream of Japan's naval aviators vanished into the deep. Yamamoto, the gambler who'd staked everything on Midway, issued the cancellation of the invasion with a heavy heart. The operation is off. His warning about the sleeping giant echoed hollow now. America had roared back. Aboard Enterprise, the mood was electric restraint. Spruance, ever pragmatic, held his ships back from reckless chase, aware of Yamamoto's lurking battleships. We've done enough, he signaled Nimitz. The deck crews cheering as Wildcats landed safely, pilots tumbling out with tailies of fire and fury. Hornet's Air Group, though late to the decisive blows, shared in the glory. Casualties mounted, 307 Americans dead, including those from Yorktown's valiant stand, but the prize, shifting the Pacific War's momentum, was priceless. Nimitz, in his Pearl Harbor headquarters, allowed a rare smile. Midway is the turning point. You can imagine the ripples spreading across the globe. In Tokyo, The Imperial General Headquarters shrouded the disaster in secrecy, newspapers trumpeting fabricated triumphs. To mask the horror, Yamamoto returned to port a changed man, his health failing under the strain, haunted by the ghosts of Akagi and her sisters. "We must rebuild," he urged. But Japan's industrial might paled against America's awakening factories. New carriers like Essex-class vessels rolling off assembly lines, pilots training in droves. The laughed-at inferior navy now dictated terms, island-hopping toward Japan with Guadalcanal as the next bloody step. The battle exposed frailties, Japan's rigid command structure, over-reliance on surprise, and the fatal rearming debacle on carrier decks. Nagumo's hesitation, caught between bomb types, turned hangars into infernos. Lessons etched in flame. For America, Midway validated code-breaking wizardry and the daring of men like McCluskey, whose fuel-starved decision to follow that destroyer wake sealed fates. Ensign Gay, rescued after witnessing the carnage, became a symbol of endurance, his debriefings fueling morale. Pearl Harbor's revenge burned bright at Midway, but it ignited a grueling war. Tarawa, Iwo Jima, Okinawa lay ahead, atomic shadows on the horizon. Arrogance drowned in the Pacific depths, imperial ambitions fractured. From mockery to mastery, the carriers once dismissed rose as avengers, charting a course to victory. The sea remembers, the wreckage below a testament to hubris, overturned.